Awesome. Welcome all to the weekly meeting of the technical committee. We have 2 absences noted in the meeting agenda. Amy and Dimitri. Outside of them, I think everyone is already here. So we can already get started. First item on the agenda is to follow up on past action items. The only action item that is left to be completed is to review Brian's patch regarding release notes for Slurp releases. I've had a chance to look at it, but I haven't finished posting my comments yet. Mostly done with it, just minor feedback, but otherwise it looks good.
Oh, good. I've just been waiting for your comments.
That's what I was going to ask. There are a bunch of things pending, including things from me from a year ago. So I assume you're going to revise that at some point?
Sure. Yeah, as soon as I get comments, I'll put stuff in.
But there, okay. Was that a sarcastic brush away? Sure, I'll erase your comments, or?
Well, possibly. No, my memory was that your comments were like mostly, this is okay, we should try to automate it. But I don't know that there's any particular.
There was one that I think that I suggested a wording change, and Amy agreed recently, and
oh, okay.
That. So there was also
if Amy agreed, then okay.
Yeah, thanks. There was another one I thought that generated some more discussion, and multiple people were like, "Yeah, let's change this." But I've been kind of waiting for that to get revised so I could go back and.
Oh, okay. I was kind of waiting for All right. So Chris, I'll wait till Krista gets his comments on, and then I'll do a revision. It shouldn't take too long.
Just posted them now. It's just a minor, instead of doing Wallaby, Sina, and Yoga, to instead do 2023.1, 2023.2, and 2024.1, so that we don't have to do alphabet math in our heads.
No, that's good.
And it better aligns with what it will actually be applied for the first time, since most people will be reading that while they are working on the release notes for the first Slurp release. So using that as an example will be much easier to follow.
All right, I'll take an action item to get that done right after this meeting. Then
so the other one was, I thought that we were hoping to, well, there's a section in there that I commented where you said, so if you hadn't thought about doing this, you probably should have, and I was confused about the wording. So I thought you were going to take the, like there was some implied intentional sarcasm, but it was confusing, I think, so.
Yeah, all right, I'll kill the sarcasm.
If you need, I could get Amy to agree with that too. I mean, I could ask her.
Right. That would no, that's fine. No, that's good. I'll just like
just let me win one, Brian. Just one.
So yeah, I looked at it last week. I think it was looking good, except like I feel like the automation is more blocker on this, because if we provide guidelines and we ask people or project to do manually, then it's going to be some contradict thing.
Well,
you'll say, okay, let us just say.
But until we have the automation, we need to have a guideline, right?
Yeah.
If the automation
was wondering, like, if there is someone, because I know in the release notes team there is hardly anyone works. So just thinking, like, if Brian has something or someone or any plan on that.
Yeah, no, I don't have a real plan. I mean, I looked into it. I'm pretty sure Reno, using normal Reno, you can generate the static page that I say we should that everybody should generate. So I think we could automate it. But yeah, I have to Well, me or somebody has to get to work on that, or me and a team of like more motivated and more competent people.
Yeah, because one thing I'm thinking, like it may like
Yeah.
add something on guideline side also. For example, in automation, if something with the tag or something we wanted to copy paste, and we want project team to have that kind of tag for easily copy pasting on static file.
Right. You're right.
That's what I was thinking. If we can have those automation thing in parallel, so that could have been very easy to visualize how the guidelines going to be used.
All right. Well, let me take an action item for next week to so I'll do the revision today, and then I'll start looking into automating what's suggested there and report back. So if I start to get into it and don't know what I'm doing and we'll need help, I'll let you know next week, and then we can start making better plans, because I guess time's a wasting.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Yep, I wrote the action item, and I also switched the topic to release note guidelines for Slurp, non-Slurp cadence, so we can continue talking about this topic if there's something else that you wanted to bring up related to it. I also noted your action item, so we can just continue on with the discussion. And the next topic, and circling back, is unmaintained status replaces extended maintenance. There was some really good feedback on the patch. I think we have mostly arrived at a consensus. I have to do a final update to make some things that were implicit more explicit, like the ability for teams to sunset their branches if they want, which was only implicitly agreed by the previous extended maintenance resolution rather than by the new one. And there was concern from Jay and Brian that we had already stopped Cinder EOLing their branches once, so it felt like the TC was taking a strong stance that people should not sunset their branches. So putting a bullet item on the resolution saying that teams can do that will assuage those fears and also provide a communication from the TC with regards to that. So please look at the patch proposal. And if you have any more feedback or concerns related to it, do let me know.
So what's your, I'm sorry, I should raise my hand or something. What's your feeling about seeding the project unmaintained, whatever project unmaintained core groups? Or do we just wait for something to arise organically?
So I like the suggestion that Jay brought up last time that I brought up last time, and then Jay reiterated, that was a global core on a maintained branches group, because that seems to reduce some of the burden that PTLs would have to maintain those branches if there is a group of known operators or maintainers that have been backporting their fixes upstream and that the community trusts. It would reduce the load on PTLs to do that vetting themselves.
Okay, I like that, because also we're going to hit the situation where, right, like the Cinder project team might have nobody step up who's interested in Cinder, but Nova might need Cinder running if they're going to make changes in their maintained branch. So I think it makes sense to have some type of global coordination.
My concern with that is that it will be too big of a hammer and people will be afraid to add people to that group. Like I definitely like, Cinder has no coverage here, but Nova does, so we have some overlap there. I'm just worried that adding someone to that group will give them powers on everything.
Another point here is, like, realistically we have to think about this. The global maintainers are all gone. Currently extended maintenance team has only one person, Elod, doing those stuff since for many years. Why we wanted to ask him to do more? Or do we expect anyone will come and serve as those global maintainer thing? right?
So
So
this
those
is
ideas already have
just,
been failed, right? So why
but
we want to try that?
this is just for unmaintained branches where we are saying that there is a very low level of expectation on upstream,
Yeah.
and it is significantly different from stable branch maintainers, which are developers of the project or developers across projects that have worked really hard to get that sort of trust. The unmaintained branches by themselves have a very low barrier
That is
for
just
that
a Gerrit
trust.
admin, right? You're saying then just a Gerrit admin. We can ask the OpenDive team every time then. What's the difference?
This is just to +2 +W patches on unmaintained branches. It's nothing more.
But
Okay,
if there
I'm
is
confused
nobody
now.
interested
So you're
from
saying like,
operators, so if there is nobody interested for keeping
yeah,
those branches alive and
because
doing the
that's
reviews,
what,
doing this +2, why there should be some global group which will do the work which nobody is interested in?
yeah, that's what extended maintenance
That's
global
my doubt, to be
team
honest.
was.
For me, if there is nobody there, it's for me clear sign that maybe this project don't need these unmaintained branches anymore. Because
Sure, but
for whom?
if you are an operator that is still maintaining, say, yoga, so yoga is still under maintenance now, but say in the future you want to maintain yoga because your deployment is still running yoga a year from now, you having to get +2 on unmaintained branches from all of the PTLs of the various projects may be a significant burden, say, operator. And this might provide a more fertile opportunity for them to.
That's a good counter argument to my argument that it's that we will be hesitant to hand out the big hammer of you are core everywhere. The counter argument is that you're more likely to seek it out if one request is going to get you everything that you need versus getting it from Cinder and Nova and whatever. So can we just maybe put something in there about the procedure for getting that core status being a low bar? Here is Christie's cell phone number, text him, he'll add you. That's all that's required, something like that,
Yeah.
just to make it clear that this is not, to make sure the bar is low enough that we don't make the bar seem high enough given the, amount of power that it brings, something like that, then I think that would be fine.
It's really interesting because you're getting to kind of the heart of why I was worried about the PTLs being in control of this necessarily, because we have basically two states, right? Two separate cases to think about here. One is where the project team cares about the unmaintained branch. In that case, everything's happy. That operator who wants his patch merged or his or her patch merged, they can go get it merged by that core team. They can show themselves active in those stables and get access to those core teams. That's a happy path. When the project team doesn't care, doesn't really have anyone who cares, that's when you kind of are in that weird state of like a PTL for that project. That same project that's decided we want nothing to do with this unmaintained branch is the person who sets that bar. And so I really like having a complete end run around the project team, so that if the project team really wants nothing to do with it, then that person can go get core on global or can reference the doc, like you said, and say, well, it says I'm willing to do this, and that willingness is like 95% of the requirement or something like that, because that I think you're getting at maybe the heart of like the conflict point that I was trying to tease out there of
That's
the PTL
fine.
being involved.
So are you saying that Ironic wants to continue maintaining their unmaintained branch so they don't have the global group as their owner of those branches, or are you saying it's blanket by policy?
I don't, with my Ironic PTL hat on, I don't really care if there are extra people with core, because if we don't have enough activity on those unmaintained branches to be actively knacking bad things, then we probably don't have enough activity on those branches to want to actively knack those things. So like, that's kind of like, there's activity, in which case everything's going to work fine because there'll be people there, they'll be looking, there'll be +1s, -1s, whatever. If no one's looking, that's the case I'm worried about. And I really like the idea of codifying that in those cases it should be a low bar, and of having the global group to like sort of make it where the project team doesn't have to care as much. Like, I definitely feel like that clearly lifts the burden of responsibility off of project teams in places that elsewhere And I don't know if we have any project teams who are going to be so peculiar as to be like, no, I don't want the help on these unmaintained.
Well, but I mean, Brian did bring up at one point, I think it was Brian, brought up that anything that's, the Cinder project repo, in the formal thing that's landing stuff, they might want to, they might not want to do the maintenance, but it seems weird to them to have people landing stuff in their tree, whatever. I mean, if they can sunset it, kill it so that it won't happen, then I guess that's their out. But I just wonder, I just don't want to be too coarse grained. Like I want to be coarse grained for the reasons that you brought up and Christy brought up, and like I say, make the bar low, but explicitly low. I just don't also want to be so coarse grained that certain projects are uncomfortable with it. And I'm thinking about, for example, pretend people, might show up to Triple O. Triple O is only maintaining Wallaby. That means that Wallaby is going to be unmaintained. And if we go with global only, we're basically saying anybody with 95%, which is the willingness, and 5%, which is an account, now has core on Triple O's only maintained, unmaintained branch. You know what I mean? That's all.
I just, for me personally, that concern, the word unmaintained is carrying a lot of the water to remove that concern, because I want someone to seriously have a conversation with me where they check out a branch called unmaintained and ask me why I'm doing a bad job maintaining it. Like, to me, I think that sort of putting it in the name removes that little nugget for me, but I'd be interested to see if Brian agrees.
One question, like proposing them moving to end of life, who will do that? That's PTL, right?
That's the PTL.
So there is a responsibility there, like PTL will keep just monitoring, okay, there is no maintainer there, there is no license for those unmaintained brands, just propose it to end of life. So you, along with that, just having like a kind of admin task also, if anyone comes, okay, I want to maintain this unmaintained brands, can you admin this core? So they just add them, right? So what's the harm, or what's because at any house PTL has to propose for end of life, right? They have to keep that cleanup thing.
No, because you only get 1 year of, or one slurp life of an unmaintained branch for free. So in the case where the PTL is completely checked out and not participating in the process whatsoever, and no one else picks up that work, a project will have an unmaintained branch open for approximately a year, and then it will be shut down because you have to opt in to maintain that afterwards. So like, we kind of do have a fail safe where if something's not being maintained, no one's paying attention to the fact it's not being maintained, that the unmaintained branch is not being maintained.
If you want to keep them,
it gets closed automatically.
Yeah, if
but in the meanwhile,
keep them open for 1 year, then it's fine. But I think that was what Brian and someone we discussed there. Like, if we don't find any liaison or anything, project team has ability to shut them down early, right? For example, 2023.1 is coming up, say in March or whatever, whenever. And after 2 months, it is clear that there is no one into the Cinder unmaintained branch coming up and all. So PTL can just shut down them before waiting for 1 year, right? So that's.
Yeah, except, but you know, if we go with this idea of a global team, then I don't think we can allow individual PT, like it wouldn't make sense for there to be an unmaintained, you know,
it still
and
still
just say
because...
no, Cinder can't participate. Even if
so that's why, like, if we are going with global group or
then I think we have to just go with, sorry.
We are completely like moving the responsibility of unmaintained to them, creating EOL, opt-in, opt-out, everything. And that's what like bring up our expectation, what we had for extended maintenance. That idea is failed, right? So that's my concern with that.
So it doesn't, the fact that there might be a global group doesn't mean that people will backport things and merge them. In that case, the PTL is still in the right to shut down the branch if there is absolutely no activity there. What a global group alongside a project-specific group allows projects is some hope that something might be merged if the PTL is completely detached 100% from the process. Because people will be allowed to merge things if they have gotten the keys from either the TC or whoever we decide has the keys to that group. And this completely removes any sort of burden on the PTL to do any vetting, any merging, because if we don't have that group, if anything needs to merge on an unmaintained branch, the PTL has to be involved in it, even in that 1 year time frame. But this allows the PTL to completely remove entirely 100% the burden if there is a known good actor that we trust above that low bar to merge things.
But here's an example, right? So the last CVE I worked on was 2023-2088, and that hit Lance Store, OS Brick, Cinder, and Nova, and Ironic, right? Now, if we discover that and Cinder is already EOL'd, but there are maintainers of Nova who want to, right, put it into an unmaintained branch, and it would be eligible because, well, probably, but let's assume for the sake of argument it's eligible. Then how are we going to handle that? So it seems like if
you mean reopening?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Like
can.
if we,
I guess I thought we said that we weren't going to reopen after it was actually EOL'd.
right. So that's.
I guess I asked the same question, but.
So yeah, so that it just seems like if we want to go with this global team, then I think we probably have to keep the branches all open and not say, hey, Cinder wants our branch closed, because we don't know, right? In 6 weeks, there might be a security fix that needs to go into it if you want to keep it maintained, and we've already closed the branch.
So you're saying like just if we have a global group, just give them all the power or everything.
Yeah, I think
So don't decide the UL thing also then.
Right, because
Right.
the reason we brought this up for Cinder was we were really uncomfortable having that code there that is in a branch that's called stable, but is vulnerable to a really bad CVE. So if we explicitly change it to unmaintained, and we also explicitly state, like in Christie's proposal, that the project teams have nothing to do with it, then there's no need for us to really EOL something.
Yeah,
well,
I
mean,
feel like.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jay.
Okay. I also think that like that's a really solid compromise, right? Because the issue that many people had who were upset about Glance going to extended maintenance was the fact that our CI is so integrated. And so by having that global group, I think it's reasonable to say as a compromise to also say everyone's opted in for that first year and stays that way, with the assumption of giving, sort of time for that group to collaborate, see if they're going to get in that branch and stuff. But at that point, it would be someone in that group or someone who's actively maintaining Cinder who would have to say, no, we opt in to the next one. But I actually think that's a reasonably good counterbalance, is saying we start out with a default with a team, although we're populated with this global team. And I'll say, and this is, I'm not speaking about actual Jay, I'm speaking about a hypothetical Jay. I'm the type of person who would sign up for that central team if I still had a downstream invested in that version, because I'm going to care a lot more about keeping Ironic dependencies running, and I'm going to be a lot more invested in that if I'm not throwing patches to an invisible group, if I'm actually putting patches up and I know that someone's going to be there to look at them.
So are we keeping the opt-in though in what you're saying?
So
after the first year?
I would propose, if this is the compromise path we're going, that the existing proposal be adopted with the minor changes of being explicit that there is a central group for core access on unmaintained teams, that group has a relatively low bar for entry, mainly based around, like, do we trust them not to pollute? Like, mainly meant to guard against malice is the way I'll say it. That all teams are opted in for the first year, for the first slurp release worth of unmaintained stuff. There's no, you cannot, like that first year of unmaintained, a PTL can no longer say, shut it down early. We'll take that ability away, and then we'll still say after that it's got to be opt-in, because we have to fail safe at the end, where if there is actually no one doing that work, we do need to make sure those branches close at the end of the day. But I also think in this sort of model, we're much more likely to see that opt-in be done in bulk by a small group of people who are invested in these, if they are. Like, that's more or less like EM failed because that group didn't exist. This not automatically renewing is just a check and balance that someone has to step up and say, I'm a group, I am here, I exist, for that branch to keep living.
Okay, but so there are like 200 project repositories or something ridiculous like that, right? So are we saying that that group, who is a few volunteer people that have very spotty things that they care about, will have to opt in all 200 of those things to keep them alive? Or are you saying that they will opt in to, yes, keep Wallaby alive of everything? Because I feel like that doesn't address Brian's concern of just leaving the branches open for basically a long period of time because we don't know when CVEs are going to come. And I think that, initially you're going to get maybe 3-4 people that don't run Manila and they don't run Tacker and they don't run whatever, and they're not going to opt into those projects. They're going to say, I care about these 6 projects and that's it.
Yeah.
And then we're going to end up in that situation. So I guess I would, since I've been the one that is much more, I don't really ever want to delete branches because I think it's just pain for little gain. Hearing Brian say there's no real need to EOL branches if they're officially called unmaintained, like, can we just like simplify this whole thing and then just like put an arbitrary 7-year and we EOL them, and they stay unmaintained between then and then? We have a global group that can do stuff to them if they want, but it's Wild West, unmaintained, and there's a date at which the system automatically kills them.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I proposed also initially based on time, so it makes sense. But with a global group, the another concern I have is like global group is just to add the core member in unmaintained code. That's it, right? Because everything they are relying on the project, not project, the project-wise unmaintained group, right? That's what main concern is. Just for a small responsibility, who can add the people to be in the unmaintained group of Noah or Cinder?
No, I think there's one unmaintained group. That's it. There's one global unmaintained group. Fungi can add people, maybe put the TC in there and make the TC add people or something like that. That's it.
Well, then we are creating the issue of that over permission thing, right? So then why we are not thinking about that in unmaintained?
Because in the policy, when he updates it, it's going to say the qualifications for being in that group are you have to want to be there, you have to have an account on Garrett, and you have to have a heartbeat, and that's it. And
so
that way it will be really
anything on Noah Cinder without knowing anything, any backport. So that's the risk, right?
That's what they're saying. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So that's the risk I'm saying. So
the only thing
if someone blows up something, the TC can always get involved and revert. Like it's not like
just consider one example. In my deployment, I have Noah Cinder glance, and I'm relying on an unmaintained branch, but I have those like say 20-25 people of say Tacker, Watcher guys, so they have also control on the things here. So I have to be more careful, right? So why it cannot be just a separate group per project and deployer just rely on them and being that group only?
It seems that we reached consensus for the way that the proposal is written now, where there is a unmaintained team per project and the PTL is the one that opts in. My suggestion is just that based on the profile of various operators that I've seen, they tend to submit fixes to discrete projects as they find things that need to be fixing. They do not have a per project loyalty the same way that developers do have. Therefore, I just want to create an alternative path in addition to all of the things that we have already talked about. I'm not saying that we get rid entirely of all per project unmaintained teams and that the PTL cede entirely the control of which unmaintained branches are alive. I'm just saying that if we highlight that there are certain operators that are submitting backports to various unmaintained branches, we add them to a global group so as to further incentivize this kind of behavior and also to lower the barrier for this kind of contributions that have been fleeting so far and that we haven't really found a way to correctly help.
So both groups is
sure.
what you're saying, a
Yes.
global and project group.
Yes.
So I would say I'm against the per project groups because I don't see what they're not going to be really helpful here, because we need the whole point of having things open across the whole state, the whole unmaintained branch, is that you're going to have to make changes in several different projects. So, I mean, presumably they're not going to put patches in that came out of nowhere, right? We're presuming they're going to at least, the one thing I would have added to what Dan said about the requirements is an additional heartbeat. They have to agree to the backport policy, right? So they're going to be relatively constrained in what they do. They'll be backporting fixes that have already been worked on by, OpenStack developers, in more recent branches. So I don't know that we need to have like a Cinder unmaintained core, because really you want to have somebody who's going to be making, so like if you backported that CVE fix to like Wallaby, you're going to have to fix several different projects.
But to be clear, in order to do that, since they can't, I mean, they could backport the change probably to Oslo, but it would be more work to do that than to basically create a stable only patch against Nova. So I think that even though they agreed at the time to the stable backport policy, I think that you should expect that they're going to do things like, well, this is the code from Oslo that I'm vendoring straight into Nova because I can't release Oslo, and it's more change in Oslo than it is, that file doesn't even exist in Oslo, versus, I can just make the changes straight into Nova. So, I mean, I think that you're going to expect that. However, I want to go back to what G-Man said and answer it with what Jay said, which is it's unmaintained. Like if you're running downstream stuff, tracking the upstream unmaintained branch, you are doing it wrong. If you forked it on GitHub from the point at which we last maintained it, and you're taking responsibility for it, then that's different. But like I thought that was the whole point of calling it unmaintained, is that it's.
So I'll tag in on 2 points there. I'll say when I worked at Rackspace and we were pulling in extended maintenance branches, we reviewed every commit that came in from upstream at that point. I would suggest to my downstream they do the same if they were on a maintained branch. But kind of setting that to the side, I do want to address what Brian said, because I think I agreed with him at one point, and now I've kind of flipped on that for one simple reason. We can't assume that all patches that are going into unmaintained branches will necessarily be related to an integrated OpenStack. If nothing else, Ironic is the example that proves that we would need to have a per project group, because there are definitely going to be people in the Ironic community who are interested in maintaining Ironic as a standalone thing in a stable branch and not want to necessarily take on what they might see as responsibility for all of integrated OpenStack in that branch. So I was on board for the only one big group for a while, but I think I've been flipped on that to where a per project group does make sense if the project group is engaged.
But no unmaintained branches for non-Slurp releases. So wouldn't that mean that all those Ironic branches that weren't part of the Slurp integrated release don't exist in the unmaintained space?
Ironic does maintain branches that are outside of OpenStack release policies, such as bug fix branches, which would be untouched by this. But we would still, I mean, for as far as I'm concerned, if this lands, I mean, that's the policy. We're not going to keep those middle branches engaged, but there's still going to be people interested in keeping them moving for standalone Ironic purposes. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about a middle branch. Don't think about the middle branches. The middle branches will not exist after this in a maintained mode. I'm saying unmaintained /2023.1, which is a Slurp branch. There are going to be Ironic contributors who are interested in keeping Ironic and Bifrost and things like that running,
but
may not want to sign up perceptionally for also maintaining Manaska and Tasker and Horizon, which a centralized group would imply.
Yeah, but think of it this way, right? If you're maintaining a distribution or something, you're going to fix the stuff that you're interested in. So we're not saying you must take care of Horizon. Somebody's going to have to join the team who wants to take care of Horizon if that's going to happen.
That's why I said what I said about documenting the low bar, and maybe we need to say that, this is not a taking responsibility thing. This is a getting access thing, or something like that. But that's exactly my original argument against the giant group, is that we would feel like giving someone this much power is too much to ever give to anyone. It's just the opposite of that perception that somebody might think for some reason that means that they had to. So whatever. If I don't know that I know that person, but if that person exists, then we should be sure to reassure them in the bullet point list. This is like, has a heartbeat but not a heart for all of these other projects, or something like that.
Other way we have to.
I anticipate that if you're in that group, you will at some point in the lifetime of that branch get pinged by someone you've never heard of on IRC to land a patch on an OpenStack project you've never looked at before. At least if you are me, that is likely to happen if you're in that
One
group.
thing, like, you have to.
Slavek has his hand raised.
Thanks. So
Okay,
just
so
one
we are
thing,
raising
because
hand, or I've been
I don't
waiting.
know. I tried. So just one thing. I also don't think like having one giant group for everything is a good idea, because I don't know if operators will even be comfortable with, like, for example, I would be operator and using Ironic, and I would have to rely on patches approved by someone who is expert in Manila only, or in, I don't know, Tucker or something like that, right? So it may be a bit risky. Regarding to Brian's comment, point about that patches needs to land in different repositories, it can happen like that, and maybe it can be that, I don't know, Cinder unmaintained core group can be included in Nova unmaintained group, and vice versa. So people from those both groups can approve patches because they kind of know both of the projects, right? But there is no point then to include Neutron or Tucker unmaintained cores in this group, because there's no point for that. So maybe doing that per project groups and combine some of them together may solve this problem somehow.
Yeah, that's my point to what Slavik mentioned. See, we are creating the unmaintained branch per project, right? And we are saying, okay, there can be any external team come up and maintain them. So why, and what the like main purpose of project wise unmaintained group is, okay, you are the three set of people from that distro, that vendor, that thing. So you come and maintain that unmaintained of Noah, and let them decide who can be the fourth maintainer of that Noah patch, right? Instead of we are saying, okay, there are 20 of people and they can merge the things in your unmaintained branch of Noah, which you are taking the responsibility of. So with project-wise unmaintained group, we will be giving them chance that this is your team, you're maintaining this. Another person coming up, you take the judgment and you give them the power to merge the backport in that Noah branch. And that's how, like, for every project it can be. That's what my main point is, what Slavik also pointed out. There's always a risk of giving every project unmaintained branch access to a particular set of people.
So it feels like there is not a consensus on a global unmaintained branch team, and there seemed to be consensus more or less on the proposal as it was with per project teams. So instead of continuing this discussion, I say I will do the modifications that we agreed on to the proposal. We can get that merged, and then moving forward, if we see that there is a desire or a need for a global group, because those people are exhibiting the type of behavior that I wanted to incentivize, then we come back to the drawing board and see about creating that group if there is a need for it. If not, then we stick to the per project teams. Yes, Brian?
Yeah, so I think the per project teams are a bad idea, right? Because look at it this way, right? What's the whole point of doing this? Because I'm thinking we should either just EOL stuff right? And if you want to maintain it, then you fork it on GitHub and do whatever. So we don't want to do that because we want to provide a collaborative space for the OpenStack community to continue to maintain stuff. And if that's the case, then I think it's going to be a lot easier to have people who are interested in doing that be in this global team. And we just have to trust them, right? So like in Cinder, some of our people are really bad with OS Brick, and they will review patches, but they won't approve them because they want to make sure somebody else looks at it. So, right, if I'm on this team and I get a thing for Tacker and I have no idea what it is, then I don't approve it. And it's going to have to sit there until somebody with Tacker expertise who wants to get that thing in there joins. And there's always the risk that somebody might just get in there and approve all sorts of stuff. But we have that anyway, right? So,
but Brian, that's the same case for, say, for example, master branch. We cannot have that much trust to anyone, like thinking, okay, I can give you power to merge things in Nova or Cinder and Ironic, but they will not do because we trust them. That's how, like, even though it's unmaintained, but still there are certain level of access level in the Gerrit we can make sure, like, okay, you can trust, but there is a access level thing which you can maintain, because no one can trust everyone.
right. No, so I agree with you entirely. So I think because the other thing is, otherwise you've got to, like, even if I'm interested in the dirty six, right? I've got 6 different teams I've got get into. And then there's 6 different PTLs or unmaintained liaisons or somebody who's got to approve the entry. So I prefer to, if the aim of this thing is to enable there to be a space where the community can collaborate on branches that are so old that the project teams don't want to have anything to do with them, then we should make it kind of easy. Because if we make it hard, then we might as well just not have it.
But
I'm
sure, like, there will be no one who will be wanted to be in all the 40 project unmaintained thing, maximum 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever their deployment is. So I'm saying, like, there will be very less chance any person will say, okay, I need permission for these 20 projects because I'm maintaining all of them.
So
if there will be someone, then like Christy mentioned, like, we can think of that global group if there is such request.
So I would like to move on with the agenda. I get Brian's point, and I'll see if there's some way to lower the barrier, like perhaps the TC or Fungi can add people to per project groups if we feel reasonably comfortable about that person having a bit more access. But I think we should continue discussing this on Gerrit. And in the meanwhile, moving on to the next topic item, which is gate health check. And I leave the ground, or the floor, I guess, for Dan.
We've been, suffering for like a month now under some really bad stuff. The way I see that this has played out, and I'm saying that as if things are going to get better, which we are always hoping for, but I think that we were struggling with some timeout issues a few weeks ago, and GM and I did a whole bunch of stuff, review, test, refactoring, or whatever, to more tightly pack the workers, which has, at least my gut feeling, has made things a lot better in terms of timeouts. It has increased the instability of a bunch of other tests as a result, I think, because we're doing more stuff per unit time and increasing load. And so one of the things that I discovered yesterday or the day before, and the fix for it just merged, is that I think my DB counter thing was, we were riding right on the edge of too much load before we started packing those workers. And now that we packed those workers really tight, we started generating a lot more database traffic. We're basically amplifying reads into writes with that thing. So that's been addressed, but it actually brings us back to something that I brought up a year or so ago, I think, that largely hasn't been addressed, and it's also something that Clark has harped on a number of times, and I think he's just done harping, but it's about like actually reviewing for efficiency and maybe making some efficiency gains. So the reason that the DB counter thing was amplifying these reads into unsustainable writes is that Keystone and Neutron both, I'm not really sure what's going on, but they're doing crazy amounts of database traffic for each operation. And like Jay was saying yesterday, I had gone and looked at some ironic jobs and looked at the ironic log to see, well, how often are we logging this for ironic? Not very often. Okay, I don't think it's really affecting them. And his point was that, well, we hit Keystone and Neutron really hard. So if those are generating lots of reads, then ironic would be suffering by that as well. Anyway, I just want to bring up again that over the course of a Tempest run, Neutron is doing 500,000 select calls compared to all of Nova's services are like 15,000, I think. Keystone is doing 135,000 select calls. And like even during DevStack setup, Neutron only does 4,000 calls, which is still a lot. Keystone does 80,000. So these are the kinds of things where as we pack more and more tests and more stuff over time into these workers, problems like that just continue to scale and make things worse. And so I have no idea why. I'm guessing that maybe some ORM stuff is like selecting multiple pieces of objects or individual objects. We select one and then we go through and loop and bring every token that guy has ever, in a separate select call or something instead of a join or whatever. But those numbers don't look right to me at all. And I think that we as technical leadership need to try to push on getting some of that stuff reviewed and not just focus constantly on new features and new hardware enablement. So that was a long spiel.
Yeah.
I apologize, but
there's not significant contributory base right now to Keystone, is there?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to bring that point. Like I had one patch on RBAC thing, adding the protections of back to Keystone that's been sitting for around 1 month or so, not merging anything. So yeah, I'm not sure like about Keystone situation. There's always weekly meeting. There is people there, but I agree with Dan request, like we as a TC should like bring up this and speed up the thing on this.
Well, Keystone is a problem and definitely a problem during setup, but it's not. I mean, it's 5 times smaller than Neutron, and everything hits Keystone. Not everything hits Neutron. So I'm during the actual run during Tempest is dominated by Neutron, and so I think Neutron probably does have the contributory base to take a look at that. So I'm hoping that Slavic can maybe push on that a little bit. Yeah. The Keystone thing will affect everybody, and so it definitely would be good to do what we can there. But anyway.
Considering that Keystone, every time you get a token, it has to give you a service catalog. To get your service catalog, it has to query all of the endpoints. That's already like every time you authenticate, that's a few dozen select calls just to give you a token. So it doesn't seem as tragic at first glance, but
why does it not seem? I mean, I'm not sure what you mean. Like that seems bad to me.
It cannot be avoided that you have to get the service catalog and query the endpoints. The problem is that you need to fetch a new token every time you do a Tempest request because it does the user setup and stuff like that. So I think most of those select calls are just token queries to get the catalog and like various things that are not hit as hard in normal day-to-day usage of a user who is using things through Horizon, perhaps. But I need to look at the stats more closely, I guess.
Well, I mean, Tempest gets credentials at the beginning of a test class in a lot of cases, right? And then runs a bunch of tests against it. But even still, I mean, the service catalog stuff certainly can be cached, right? Because that on a normal system, that should not be changing a whole lot. The tokens, are tokens, right? But like that's the kind of thing that I mean. And if I don't know, I would expect that one run of Tempest is a small drop in the bucket compared to a cloud with many more users wide than depth of like accesses at any given point, right? Like I would imagine that a whole bunch of users are running one thing infrequently versus one user running a whole bunch of things all at once. And that would make that problem that you're talking about scale much wider than Tempest, because Tempest only has 4 users at a time or so, right?
There's a comment from Fungi on IRC saying that the Keystone activity during DevStack setup seems likely related to lack of token caching and insistence in DevStack making lots of independent calls to OpenStack client.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have to look at the data more closely to see what's happening. It might be that there's some bug in some caching of sorts, because there are various mechanisms that allow you to filter the endpoints that the token or a user sees, so that sort of caching might be on a per user basis, and with Tempest creating various users, that might not be something that is encountered in those circumstances.
But the DevStack setup is very much more like a user activity, right? Where they're running OSC over and over again as a single user. So I feel like that's pretty indicative of what would be regular behavior. Now, if we were to merge the OSC as a service thing, which I would like to do anyway, we will hide that and we will make it look like things are better than they are, because we'll get one token and do a whole bunch of stuff against it, whereas that is not how regular users would end up using their thing. So but anyway, I'm concerned not only about the actual test execution and how much work we're doing that we probably don't need to be doing and can't do forever, but also the actual real world performance of this stuff. And we should not throw away our own dog fooding data, I think, or unless we can actually prove that Tempest is a pathological case, but I don't think it is.
And on network side, as Slavik, you might know, not every test create the network resource, but whatever test create the network resource, it's just a per like one network subnet port per test class. Right, so it's not like a lot of networking things test is creating on the setup.
Yeah, but it is also creating router, attaching router to networks to router, setting external gateways for this router, floating IPs, etc., etc. So usually it is doing a lot of things.
That's one per test cases, like not per test, actually one per test class. Not every test does that.
Yeah. Also, when I was looking at the neutron logs, I was seeing like within 1 second, like 4 stat reportings in 1 second of 100 select calls. So like 100 select calls all at once within a second. And I would expect that's not due to just test setup. That's like some sort of looping over every port in a subnet with a separate select call or something like that.
I will for sure take a look, and I will also talk with Rodolfo next week once he will back from PTO, and we'll try to do something with that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And another thing, like on this timeout thing, as Dan mentioned initially, the concurrency increase actually help in other case other than if we solve these two things. Like one example, Tempest slows over, it used to take 3 hours. So there are 2 changes I made in that. One is to run them parallel, and this concurrency increase from 4 to 6 by default. So that has dropped down that time from 3 hours to 1.5 hours. Almost 50% of the time is now reduced in Tempest slow job. So that concurrency increase, I'll say it will help, but obviously that's not the solution for balancing the test on worker. That is still, we will seeing that, because that's something on S-tester. And there is one pull request from Matthew Trenis was their very old one. He was trying to solve that balancing among worker, and that's like is not done.
Yeah, and that will be super awesome. I don't think that we
Yeah.
should bet on that ever happening. If it does, it'll be cool, but that too will increase the amount of load that we're putting on the system, which it just means that our efficiency needs to be better in line, and our stability needs to be better in line. Because at some point we can't just keep adding tests to something that has to run in 2 hours on 6 cores. But
Yeah.
so anyway, I just wanted to make the plea to the technical leadership here to try to, keep that in mind and push, on the specific Keystone and Neutron. I think both have things that can be chased. We could all probably do better. While I was looking at that, Nova's definitely lazy loading some object attributes that it can pre-query. So I need to circle back with that, and that will tighten up the Nova case. But I think we all need to keep that stuff in mind.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. We are almost at time. Anything else, or I might end it 2 minutes early? Well, thanks all for showing up and for the discussion. Have a good one.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.